Hey people, thank you for stopping by Building Wealth with Ajif. Trust all of you guys are well. Difficult times from the financial market, from the global economy point of view, unprecedented times, I would say. And in these unprecedented times, I've had privilege of chatting with Jim Roger. He's a legendary investor of our time. Jim and me talked about the state of the markets, state of various markets like China, India, US, Japan, globally, about inflation, about interest rates, about debt. What are the investable places now? Where can we invest our hard-earned money? Which are the sectors which are good? Which are the countries which are good? Is commodity a good option? I hope you like the chat. Smash the like button if you like the chat. Share with your friends. Also, please subscribe to my channel for such things in future. Jim, pleasure to see you again. You look healthy, and it's really great to see you.
I am delighted to be here, and I hope you can help me build some wealth.
All right. Jim, what's going on? What the hell is going on?
What's going on? Look out the window. Disaster everywhere. War, economic problems, famine, everything.
Yeah.
So I'm sure more things can go wrong, but we got enough right now going wrong.
And how are you reading it? Is it the starting point, or is it we're in the middle of it? You've been talking about recession for some time. We haven't seen it yet, but the indications are very, very poor, or very, very, right there in the horizon.
What I have tried to explain to people is, 2008, we had a problem because of too much debt, economic problem because of too much debt. Well, since then, the debt has skyrocketed all over the world. So the point I've tried to explain to people is the next time we have an economic problem, it's going to be very, very bad because there's so much debt. 2008 was bad because of debt. Oh my gosh, since 2008, the debt everywhere, even China, has skyrocketed now. So the next time we have a problem, it's going to be very bad. You should watch Building Wealth to find out when it's coming.
Is it like I'm sure you're glued to the markets and all. Is it the time now? I mean, I know nobody can predict time, but I'm sure you can see some signs there based on experience.
Well, I would suspect, yes, it is time. It is happening. We see signs all over the world that it's happening. But the war, of course, has distorted things a bit. My suspicion, and it's not I don't know, but once the war ends, and it will end someday, there'll be a big rally. Everybody will think things are okay now. We have a big rally, but that will be the last rally. And then we'll slide further and further into recession and bear markets because the debt is very, very, very high now. Interest rates will go higher. Inflation will go higher. It will not be fun.
But what is this? I've been following Fed, and I'm sure you too. They are talking about raising multiple rates multiple times. Now, wouldn't that help?
Well, I have learned not to pay too much attention to most central banks. Most central banks have no clue what they're talking about or what they're doing. India had a good central bank a few years ago. The US had a good central bank 30, 40 years ago. But, we haven't had many good central bankers in history. And so I don't pay too much attention to them.
So what should I do? I mean, person like me who's invested in US equities, drawdowns are pretty significant and is red all over. What should I do?
Well, the first thing is you should only invest in what you yourself know a lot about. If you ask me what to do, you're already on the wrong foot. You should only be investing in things that you know a lot about, because then when things go wrong, you know what to do. If you listen to somebody else and things start going wrong, you don't know what to do. You don't know why you're there in the first place. So my very, very strong insistence for everybody is don't listen to me. Don't listen to anybody. Just stay with what you know, and then you'll come through okay.
Do you think any market in the world is a little less vulnerable to the meltdown we're seeing now?
What hitting the world?
Any market which is less vulnerable to the whole, the whole declines?
Uzbekistan. I bought shares in Uzbekistan recently, but most people couldn't tell you where Uzbekistan is. So, but it's going to be less susceptible than many other markets, partly because nobody has invested there yet. it's undeveloped. If you can find places like that, sure. Agriculture is another area that's been a disaster for a long time. So I'm less pessimistic about agriculture. I'm less pessimistic about Uzbekistan. There are things where one can find opportunities, but just be careful and stay with what you know.
So I think this brings me, because last time, Jim, when we talked, you talked about commodity as well. I think there is an index also on your name, right? The commodity index. Now, I have no knowledge of commodity. I've always focused on equity. I'm just taking an example, and property. Now, suddenly I shift to commodity now. What do I do? How do I shift?
Well, normally, if you invest in something, most people should invest in an index, because many studies show that indexes outperform most active investors, no matter what the field. So if you want to invest in commodities, you might consider an index. But as I look around the world, shares have been in bubbles and bubbles forming. That's been correcting recently. Bonds are certainly in a bubble. Bonds have never been this expensive in the history of the world. Property in many countries is a bubble. I mean, South Korea, New Zealand, many places, property is a bubble. The only asset class I know that's not a bubble, that is not too expensive, are commodities. I mean, silver's down 60% from its all-time high. Sugar's down 60% from its all-time high. Most commodities are still cheap on a historic basis. And that's the only asset class I know where things are still cheap. But if you don't know about commodities, don't invest in commodities. If you don't know what cotton is, don't invest in cotton. And if you do, you should consider an index, like people should for nearly all assets.
What is the index you would like to, you have any suggestion on index, commodity index, which could be a little wholesome and people could,
Well, I came up with some indexes 2 or 3 decades ago because I had to have a place to invest my own money. And these indexes are listed on the New York Stock Exchange. They have done better than the other indexes. So for once I did something right, but they're, RJA, RJI, RJN, RJZ. I mean, they're all listed on the New York Stock Exchange for agriculture, metals, energy, they're indexes. And as I say, maybe it was just an accident, but so far, these indexes have outperformed the other commodity indexes.
So I think I know that you've long had some views on US, and the pretty strong views, Jim. And the technology sector of US with a 3 to 5 months horizon, and their companies are global. You have, let's say, index there is QQQ, which is NASDAQ, which copies NASDAQ, or S&P. Now, with somebody, an investor with 5 years time horizon, 6 years time horizon, does it make sense to pick these bargains now?
Well, again, I don't know how you ask about, there are dozens of American technology companies. I don't know which ones are going to do well. If we were 25 years ago, if this were 1997, yeah, Microsoft survived, Amazon survived. Many of them did not survive, though. In that big boom of technology boom, many companies disappeared. So if you just said, oh, they're all down, if you said in 2001, for instance, they're all down, let's buy them. If you bought some of them, you'd be rich. But many of them just disappeared. So please stay with what you know.
But do you think next 10 years or next decade belongs to technology, or it doesn't? Belongs to disruptive innovation, technology, those companies?
There's always innovation and technological innovation. It has been since the beginning of time. And of course, there will be. I am not technologically knowledgeable. I don't know a lot about technology. So I have no idea which ones will come out ahead. But if you do, you should buy them if they're down and if the price is right. As I say, I would rather invest in the next 10 years in something like silver or agriculture or something like that, because these assets are down from their all-time highs. As I said, silver's down 60% from its all-time high. There's not many assets you can say that about.
But what makes you think
that are viable?
But what makes you think that they will survive and thrive? I mean, you see, if silver is 60% down, so is probably, let's say, a Microsoft, not a Microsoft 60%, but 30% or 40%. So what makes you think that, investing in silver is a wiser choice?
Well, Microsoft has been around a few decades, and it has a track record which one can fall back on. I'm not saying that Microsoft's going to do very well in the next 2 or 3 decades, but many companies that once they're established and they have competent management and competent products, they do last for a long time. But nothing lasts forever. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is now about 125 years old. None of the companies in the original Dow Jones Industrial Average are still in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. It's changed. The world is always changing. So yeah, you can look at the Dow Jones and say, oh, these are major companies, and they are, but they always have been, and they don't survive.
Yeah. And what do you make out of this Ukraine-Russia war, Jim? What's your view on that? I'm not saying what date will it finish. The start of the war. I mean, I know you have very good macro view, also geopolitical views. Is it something to do with the US, this war?
Well, the US is the number one economy in the world, and has been for a few decades, but no country that has been number one has stayed number one forever. It always changed. Most world currencies, for instance, which have been at the top, have only lasted 100, 125 years or so. So just time-wise, the US is certainly not at the beginning of its run. And since the US is now the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, and we're getting overextended in many ways, economically, debt-wise, militarily, I can certainly foresee the day when the US is not on top again. I don't know who's going to replace the US, certainly not which currency. China looks as though it's going to be the next number one country in the world, but who knows? But I do know that no country and no currency has stayed on top very long, more than 100 years or so.
Okay, now, are you still as bullish on China as you were, Jim, about 5 years ago? I mean, they have a lot of debt, and they have COVID, they have problems now.
That's a major change from the last time we had a problem, 2008. China had a lot of money saved for a rainy day. It started raining. They started spending their savings and helped bail out the world. But now China has a lot of debt too. So I don't know who's going to bail us out next time. North Korea? I doubt it. But China is certainly in less bad shape than most countries. But remember, the United States became the most successful country in the 20th century. But along the way, we had several depressions, many bankruptcies, wars, many problems. We did come out on top and stayed on top for a long time, but even we had a lot of problems as we were rising to the top. China has problems, and they will have more problems, but that does not mean they won't rise to the top eventually.
And what's so? But are you still holding on to your investments in China, or you're buying more?
I have investments in China. I have not sold any. I'm always looking for investments anywhere. If I come across something, whatever it is, I will do my research, and I hope if it's good, I'll buy some.
Okay, and what is your Jim view on, you've had some, last time we talked, you've had some investments in Russia as well, isn't it?
I did have investments in Russia. I mean, nobody has investments in Russia right now. They've all either been confiscated, or the markets are closed, the currencies collapsed. You can't do anything in Russia now. Normally, at a time like this, I would be buying Russia, because I have learned that if you buy a country when it's at war and things are very desperate and collapsed, it's normally a good thing if you have staying power, if you can wait a few years. But right now, as far as I know, it's not possible to buy things in Russia, certainly not for Americans. Maybe somebody, maybe if you're a Uzbekistani or something, you can buy in Russia. But for most people, it's not practical.
Yeah. I think maybe, so do you see any changes post-war? I mean, when Ukraine or Russia get settled down, do you see any changes happening across the world in terms of economics or,
Well, we're certainly going, this is accelerating or intensifying the inflation moves. We already had inflation before the war. This just makes it worse because Russia and Ukraine supply a lot of agricultural and minerals to the world and energy to the world. So this is just going to make the inflation, which we already had because of too much money printing and too much borrowing and spending, just going to make it worse.
Yeah, and you think of India in these times, or you don't?
Do I think of India?
Yeah.
I always think of India. India is a wonderful, wonderful country. If you can only visit one country, I've said many times, if you can only visit one country in your life, it should be India because it's an astonishing country. I didn't say if you could only invest in one country, it should be India. You know, they have a massive bureaucracy and building up a lot of debt. But no, I'm very keen on India. I don't have investments there at the moment, but I'm always watching.
And are you watching the blockchain space and crypto space also? Do you have
Well, of course, like blockchain is going to be one of the, if not the most important changes in the 21st century. It's going to put a lot of people out of business. I mean, electricity put a lot of people out of business too, and it changed the world. Blockchain is going to be extremely significant. Many banks' back offices will certainly disappear because blockchain is a major, major revolution, and it's going to change everything we know.
What I think I've asked most of my questions, Jim. I think it's pretty 20 minutes, but I've asked most of my questions. One thing, our last thing is, again, is it the time for people to keep the cash? What should they do with the excess cash? They keep it, they wait for it. What do they do?
If you know a lot about something, that's what you should do. If you know a lot about sugar, you might want to invest in sugar. If you know a lot about Apple and you think it's the right price, maybe you should invest in Apple. I mean, you point out that some stocks are down a fair amount here in the last few months. If you know something, I mean, most American stocks are still not down a lot. Hasn't been a real bear market yet. But if you know a company that's going to come out and the price is right, you should be investing in it. Otherwise, put your money in cash and wait. I mean, it's better to earn 1% for a while than to lose 10 or 20% for a while. So just, if you don't have something that you know is the right thing to invest in right now, put your money in cash and wait.
How long do you think it could last, Jim, this route?
The next bear market is going to be the worst in my lifetime. I told you we had a problem in 2008 and 9 because of debt. The debt since then has skyrocketed everywhere. The Japanese, oh my gosh, the English, everybody has built up huge amounts. America has built up huge amounts of debt. So it's got to be a very bad and long economic problem. We've never had such debt in the world as we have now. I mean, not everybody. Uzbekistan doesn't have a lot of debt. North Korea doesn't have a lot of debt, but those countries are not going to change the world or affect the world very much. But the countries that do, Japan, America, America's the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. So the next time we have a problem, it's going to be a serious problem. I don't like saying this. I'm an American too, but I have to deal with facts and I cannot just ignore them.
But again, just on the closing note, Jim, what's the way out? Debt is not going to go overnight, right? Debt is going to remain. China will not be able to pay all its debt once. US will not be able to pay its debt at once. So what's the way out?
Extremely good question. Find places that don't have a lot of debt that have something good going for them, whether it's Uzbekistan or not, I don't know. You know, I said, if I weren't an American, I would probably be trying to buy things in Russia now, or when the war gets closer to an end. I have learned that buying countries when they're in civil war or war, if you get it near the end, you're probably going to do well down the road. Buy Ukraine when the war gets closer to being at an end. Both of those countries have huge assets. They're damaging themselves badly right now. I mean, this is a crazy, crazy war. It's hurting them. I don't know whoever wins this war is not going to win. It's because so much is being destroyed. But look at places like that, because there may be great opportunities in Ukraine when this finally starts coming to an end.
Right.
But to your point, I mean, Japan has got staggering debt and a declining population. I mean, it has been a great success story for 50 or 60 years. And I own Japanese ETFs, but it doesn't mean they're not going to be big problems in the future. So I, anyway, am trying to find, you know, why don't you watch Building Wealth? They'll tell you where to invest.
Well, I think, Jim, thank you so much. Interview finished faster than what I thought out to be. But I've asked all my questions. Any last note? I don't know whether, you're such a respected investor. Any last note you have for people, my subscribers in these time? I mean, you've already told how to spend the money, cash.
Well, I will say to everyone, please be very careful, because we are in unprecedented times. America's stock market has had its longest bull run in history. Never in history has the American stock market gone up so long without a bear market. Doesn't mean it won't last 30 more years, but it hasn't, never has. So and America is now the largest debtor nation in world history. So the next time we have a problem, it's going to be serious. So please become knowledgeable. Once you become knowledgeable, you'll get worried, and then you'll probably protect yourself and you'll probably be okay. But just be sure to stay informed, because the next time around is not going to be fun.
Well, thanks, Jim. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah,
it's
cheers.
always fun.
Thank you, Jim.